Chairperson, delegates, I want to warmly welcome you to our 51st Annual Delegate Conference, which of course is our first face-to-face conference in 3 years. In concluding our last in-person conference in April 2019, my final remarks were, this has been an extremely demanding and challenging year, and I have no doubt we have many and bigger challenges ahead. Well, little did I or any of us know the enormity of those challenges we were facing into and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on our health service, society, and particularly on frontline workers over these years. We did, of course, hold our 2020 AGM online, and we conducted the legally required formal meetings for 2020 and 2021 online as well. I want to thank you for your participation and for supporting us in those unusual circumstances, which ensured that essential work and decisions for the Union were allowed to continue throughout COVID restrictions. As we adapt to what is described in that awful phrase, the new normal, essentially living with some form of COVID or a variant of it in our lives, there is a reluctance to dwell too much on looking back over the extraordinary events of the last 2 years. But for those of us in the health services and on the front line of delivering those services, we must reflect on the experience and the lessons learned, or not, as the case may be. And of course, even as we continue to deal with the legacy of COVID and the ongoing threat of emerging new variants, we now find ourselves witnessing the horror of the war in Ukraine and its toll of pain and suffering on innocent men, women and children. We stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and of course, as a country, Ireland will extend its hand of comfort and support to the many thousands fleeing the war who will find their way here. The quick response of the government in putting in place the practical measures to allow those seeking refuge to come here is welcome, and we need to ensure now that our services, including our mental health services, are adequately resourced to ensure they can respond to whatever added demands and pressures arise from this unprecedented situation. Those fleeing the horrors of the war in Ukraine and seeking refuge here deserve nothing less. It has been commented on many times, and it continues to be the case, that the pandemic has thrown up unprecedented challenges for our health services, and these demands and challenges have been acute across our mental health services. With that in mind, imagine my astonishment when last week I received correspondence from the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform to no less announcing the cessation of the special leave with pay for COVID-19 with effect from the end of June. This is a decision made in the absence of NPHET, but by officials sitting in safe, secure office or home settings, well aware from the COVID reality faced on the front line of the health services. It is observed that in the current and ongoing stages of COVID, that staff are being told to revert to standard sick leave arrangements, which we know cannot cover the circumstances where people are sick and recovering from COVID. This is totally unacceptable, and I will be seeking an urgent engagement with DPAR, the Department of Health and the HSE to demand that the special leave arrangements are maintained in order for there to be some chance for COVID to be properly managed in the health services. In January of this year, the government announced the establishment of a new bank holiday and the intention of holding a double bank holiday on March the 17th and 18th. On the same day, following months of speculation and criticism, the government also announced a recognition payment of €1,000 for frontline healthcare workers. There was an immediate outpouring of gratitude towards those in the public service as politician after politician stepped forward to explain the ins and outs of eligibility and payment. However, by the time the proposal got to the HSE, it had been watered down and it turned into an administrative nightmare. We now had the possibility of employees having to apply for the recognition payment, and we had two sets of pro rata calculations that could have seen some receive as little as €200. The phrase that constantly came to mind was, "A camel is a horse designed by a committee." How could something so simple become so difficult and so wrapped up in bureaucracy? I am glad to say that following numerous engagements with the HSE and the Department of Health, the matter has been significantly simplified. Although the employer was unwilling to remove the idea of a pro rata payment, as it had been dictated by government to be paid on that basis, the number of payment options was reduced from 5 to 2. The circular is awaiting publication and will see all frontline workers who are vaccinated under sequence Group 1 and Group 2 of the vaccination programmes and who worked on site during the pandemic receive a payment of €1,000 for those working on a full-time basis. Those working hours under 60% of full-time will receive a tax-free payment of €600. A minimum period of 4 weeks worked is also required. However, we are fully confident that all nurses, due to their inclusion in Sequence Group 2, will receive the payment. As I address you here today, we are still awaiting a final document and indicative dates for the time periods and appeals procedure. We will, of course, ensure that all the relevant information is circulated to branches as soon as it becomes available. As we look back, we have to accept that part of the post-pandemic reality is that we will undoubtedly see further pressures on our already overstretched mental health services. Even as we went through COVID, I felt it incumbent on me to write to Minister Donnelly on a number of occasions to point to what I saw as an inevitable surge in demand for mental health services and alert him to the fact that against that background and the ongoing crisis in mental health, it is inconceivable that the mental health budget was reduced from 6% to 5% of the health budget, as was the case in Budget 2020 and continued in Budget 2022. Sadly, the pandemic has highlighted to us all how the infrastructure in a significant number of approved centres is simply not suitable to manage situations like this due to the number of shared bedrooms. It confirmed yet again that government needs to urgently invest in a major capital programme to address glaring inadequacies. One way of hope on that front is the publication of Sharing the Vision Implementation Plan for 2022 to 2024, which we are told will provide detailed 3-year plans for each of the Sharing the Vision's 100 recommendations. I have to say that it is unfortunate that it took almost 2 years from the publication of Sharing the Vision to develop an implementation plan. However, I look forward to the presentation of the plan by the Chair of the Implementation Group, Mr. John Saunders. I welcome the establishment of 3 pilot crisis resolution teams. This is, of course, a development that has been called for and advocated from this rostrum for many years at P&A conferences. These teams and this model of service are widespread and highly developed in several other countries, including Australia, Canada and the UK. Again, it is essential that early engagement takes place with the P&A in relation to these pilot projects, their role, composition, staffing and integration in mental health services. A significant number of these plans are relying on funding being approved on a yearly basis. However, if these initiatives are to be truly effective and become embedded in our mental health services, then it is imperative that the funding is delivered on a multi-annual planning and budgeting model rather than the present funding model, which relies on rolling funding approval and results in huge delays in recruitment and resourcing. This is just one of the very many important budgetary and policy impediments that would come under the remit of a National Director of Mental Health. And I am calling once again for the re-establishment of the role to give senior executive authority, oversight and accountability for mental health services implementation. We all know that the prospects of better pay, better conditions and better career advancement are a huge draw to other countries for our highly qualified and professional nurses. Unfortunately, the end of the pandemic restrictions now creates an additional problem in relation to the provision of services, as we are once again holding going away parties for our young nurses who are looking for opportunities abroad and emigrating to Australia, Canada and the UK. As we have witnessed so many times, this will again create an unsustainable reliance on overtime and agency. To counter this, it is imperative that all our new graduates are offered permanent contracts as soon as they graduate. This must be planned at least 6 months prior to graduation to give these graduates certainty and stem the drift abroad. An example of the lack of foresight and mismanagement was demonstrated in Longford Westmeath Mental Health Services earlier this year, where at a union management forum it was announced that €825,000 was handed back to central funds. This coincided at a time when none of the October 2021 graduates had been employed, despite there being vacancies in this service. This service is significantly underdeveloped and is not in line with Vision for Change or Sharing the Vision. I'm calling on the Minister to ensure that this kind of mismanagement is never repeated, and assurance given to all our graduates that they are guaranteed permanent employment upon graduating. Even where there are few vacancies, as is the case in a small number of our services, our graduates must be retained to develop services in line for sharing the vision. The time for short-term solutions is over. We need a strategic workforce plan for mental health to be put in place as a matter of urgency to address short, medium and long-term measures to alleviate the hemorrhaging of our nurses out of our services. Again, unfortunately, it took the COVID-19 pandemic to highlight how much our student nurses are undervalued in relationship to internship pay and allowances for supernumerary students. At our ADC in 2020, an emergency motion was passed to seek an urgent meeting with the Department of Health regarding student nurses' allowances and pay. Since then, we have had numerous engagements with the Department, culminating in 2 independent reports. The first of these, the Collins report, in December 2020, was the short-term review, the main finding of which was €100 per week pandemic payment for supernumerary students when on clinical placement. This was followed by a long-term review by Mr. Sean McHugh to examine allowances for supernumerary students and internship pay. The report was finally issued in September 2021. Its main findings were internship pay to increase from 71% of the first point of the staff nurse scale to 80%. A new circular to be issued re travel and subsistence, using the key principles of HSE travel and subsistence rates. 2 additional uniform tunics to be issued prior to the start of internship. Until negotiations are complete in relation to the report's recommendations, the following interim measures have been agreed. Interns who commenced their internship in January 2022 will be paid €50 pandemic payment per week for their 36 weeks placement. Supernumerary students will receive the €100 pandemic payment per week from the start of the 2021 to 2022 academic placements. This is currently under review. Supernumerary students can claim up to €100 per week accommodation cost and separately claim travel expenses. The Buchanan recommendations will be progressed through engagement between the Department of Health and the nursing unions. It is envisaged that this will be finalised and put in place by September 2022. I want to particularly thank the University of Limerick students Brianne Tracy, Sarah Shinners and Danielle McGrath for their testimonies to Professor Collins and Mr McHugh. They were excellent. Delegates, you will have heard CAMHS discussed many times over the years from this rostrum. The historic underinvestment in our CAMHS services has consigned young people and their families to years of difficulties in accessing vital services, and in many publicised incidents, children being left with no other options but the inappropriate admission to adult services. The Maskey report on the look-back review into CAMHS in Kerry highlighted very serious concerns in relation to the governance and under-resourcing of the service. Unfortunately, this is not unique, and similar deficits have been highlighted by the P&A at conferences over the years and in a detailed submission to the Oireachtas Subcommittee on Mental Health in 2017, and yet very little has changed. Staffing of child and adolescent mental health service teams remain under-resourced, with less than 60% of the staffing as recommended in Vision for Change. There are only 2 day hospitals, despite 16 recommended in Vision for Change. In January this year, Dr Niall Muldoon, the Ombudsman for Children, addressed the Oireachtas Subcommittee on Mental Health, where he stated, the mental health budget is minuscule. He further goes on to state that the best guesstimate is that 20% of the mental health budget is spent on children, which means that less than 1% of the overall health budget is spent on children's mental health. This is abysmal. Funding is a long way short of addressing this ongoing crisis. The children of this country are the future of this country, and we must ensure the children who require mental health services are safeguarded and provided with quality, properly resourced therapeutic services. Over the past few years, the pay rates for our members in St Patrick's Hospital Dublin had fallen behind HSE rates, particularly for staff nurses near the top of the scale and promotional grades. A pay claim was lodged by the St Patrick's branch in the final quarter of 2021, and following intensive weekly engagements, agreement was reached and ratified by the membership in February 2022. The pay rates are now slightly above HSE rates, and the pay rises are retrospective to January 2021. I want to particularly thank Sinead Brady, Kate Toomey and Owen Ward for their hard work, persistence in bringing this matter to a satisfactory conclusion for our St Patrick's members. The new National Forensic Mental Health 170-bed hospital in Portrane was handed over to the HSE last summer. This is the second largest capital health development in the country, next only to the new Children's Hospital. This is a welcome development and will provide modern facilities for the service users. The 170-bed campus has 70 beds more than the current service in Dundrum. Incorporated within the campus is a 10-bed child and adolescent mental health unit, a 10-bed mental health of intellectual disability unit, and a 30-bed intensive care rehabilitation unit. It is unfortunate that these units will not open, and it is expected that approximately 100 beds will open initially. This is mainly due to insufficient nurses, as there is a need for up to 200 additional nurses to staff the full 170-bed service. There has been engagement with the HSE under the auspices of the WRC for over 2 years now. A number of proposed opening dates have been deferred, mainly due to the intransigence of management and the intervention of DPAR and the Department of Health. Over the past few months, engagement has been sparse. However, following a meeting with HSE management last week, it is envisaged that negotiations will intensify over the coming weeks and months on all the outstanding issues. One of the key, if not the most fundamental priority for any employer is to ensure that employees are paid the correct salary and at the correct time. This principle is key to ensuring that employees are respected and rewarded for their service. However, this is most certainly not a priority for the HSE. The excessive delays in paying hard-fought successful claims and retrospection is totally unacceptable and shows a total disregard to our members. We were assured that with the introduction of the NISAP payment system, that payments will be simplified and easily adjusted. Our experience of the last 2 years is totally the contrary. It is almost 2 years since the circular in relation to the restoration of Tyban a Sixth was issued, yet we are currently in the WRC in relation to outstanding retrospection due in several services. There have also been significant delays in payments to CPCs and area directors of nursing. Delay in payment of pensions is an issue highlighted at conference over the years, remains totally unacceptable, particularly in the Greater Dublin area, where it takes 4 to 6 months for pension and lump sums to be paid. These excessive delays are more extreme in the CHO areas, whereas the delay is minimal in the hospital group services. Ironically, when it came to cutting nurses' salaries during the financial crisis, this was done very quickly and very efficiently. It is time for the HSE to get their act together, to respect their staff by doing the basics of paying them their entitlements and urgently address this issue. Also, in relation to pay discrepancies, there have been issues in relation to pay in St Vincent's Hospital, Fairview, a Section 38 service, with many errors since the new year. This came to a head last week when there were major concerns that staff would not get paid last Thursday. Following representation by the local branch and head office staff were paid. However, there continued to be some discrepancies. Management have assured us that the issues will be rectified for the next payday. This breach of the Payment of Wages Act will not be tolerated, and should the assurances of management not come to fruition, we will consider all our options, including taking industrial action. Delegates, I have already referred several times to the heroic dedication and service of frontline staff during the pandemic. Nowhere has this been more evident than that shown by ambulance personnel, whose work during COVID has, in my view, not been adequately recognised. From the union's point of view, COVID, of course, meant that the NASRA campaign for the right to union recognition and for the right of the workers to be members of and represented by the union of their choice had to be suspended. But the NASRA work on the ground, led by the resolute Tony Gregg in representing members in work and disciplinary dispute cases, has never stopped. The NASRA campaign continues, and there was a significant development in the Dáil in November when Sinn Féin health spokesperson David Cullinan introduced a private member's motion on the National Ambulance Service. People Before Profit TD Breach Smith added an amendment to the motion as follows: to direct the Health Service Executive to recognise the National Ambulance Service Representative Association, who are members of the Psychiatric Nurses Association, as a trade union with full collective bargaining rights for its members employed in the National Ambulance Service. The motion as amended was unopposed by the Government and was passed. This in effect means that it is now the position of Dáil Éireann that NASRA be recognised as a trade union within the PNA. This is not a binding motion on the government, but it brought the NASRA case onto the floor of the Dáil, and it allows us to keep the pressure on the politicians to now make good of the wording of this motion. I might also say that we brought the Dáil motion to the attention of the former Labour Party leader, Alan Kelly, in light of a rousing defence by him of the right to union membership at the Labour Party conference in November. Needless to say, we never heard from him. But perhaps the new Labour leader, Ivana Bacik, will see her way to support the 12-year battle by NASRA for the fundamental worker right to be a member of the union of their choice. I will be writing to her shortly on this. The P&A remains fully committed to NASRA and its members, and I look forward to reinvigorating the campaign in the coming months. As outlined in conferences over the past number of years, intellectual disability services have experienced and continue to experience transition and reconfiguration as per time to move on from congregated settings. At present, there are several services planning decongregation programmes in Donegal and also transition programmes in the mental health of intellectual disability services in St Joseph's, Portrane and St Bridget's in Ballinasloe. These projects are proven to be very challenging for our representatives, and it is very difficult to get management to present realistic and robust proposals that would enable us to work in collaboration to develop the services. For example, we've been waiting for over a year to attain a detailed proposal in relation to the development of the St Joseph's Portrane services, despite numerous requests. This has become a recruitment and retention issue, as staff are unsure as to what the future service will look like. A common theme throughout the country is the reluctance of the HSE management to adhere to the Shaping the Future of Intellectual Disability Nursing in Ireland report. This report identifies the future needs and direction of intellectual disability nursing for the expansion of skills and nursing roles for RNIDs to encompass a lifespan approach to care for people with intellectual disabilities. It is imperative that this report is utilised to ensure intellectual disability services create much needed new and more specialised roles for RNIDs. There is a dearth of specialised roles within the ID services, and in particular advanced nurse practitioners, despite many RNIDs pursuing both postgraduate education at master's level. There appears to be a reluctance of the management of ID services to utilise the leadership and professionalism of these highly educated nurses. To the best of my knowledge, there are 5 registered advanced nurse practitioners working in the ID services and 8 candidate AMPs nationally. It was agreed as part of the settlement of the recent nursing recruitment and retention dispute that 2% of the nursing workforce would be at AMP level, which equates to approximately 50 in the ID services. It is shameful and a disservice to the service users that only 10% of these posts have been progressed. It is essential that this disparity is urgently addressed, and we must ensure that specialist RNAD roles are a central focus of service reconfiguration and development throughout the country. Our P&A College, in collaboration with the Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery, RCSI, continued professional development programmes throughout the pandemic online. The autumn-winter schedule, which is just finished, were subsidised by the P&A and the RCSI and was provided free to our members. I want to take this opportunity to thank Professor Thomas Cairns and the RCSI Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery for their continued collaboration and work, especially over the last 2 years, which saw excellent attendance and uptakes of these programmes. I would also encourage you all to register for the spring-summer schedule, which is due to commence next month. Obviously, due to the pandemic, there has been no Horatio conference since 2019. I'm pleased to inform you that a conference is planned for next year in Malta, and as soon as we have further details, we will keep you informed. One of the key aspects of the Building Momentum Agreement 2021-2022 was the establishment of an independent body in April 2021 under the chairmanship of Mr Kieran Mulvey to address the additional working hours brought in under the Haddington Road Agreement. PNA made her submission to the body in June of 2021, and in January this year the report of the Independent Hours Body was published and recommended that HRA hours implemented in 2013 will be resolved with effect from July the 1st, 2022. As July the 1st is fast approaching, it is crucial that local engagement commences as a matter of urgency and to seek advice from head office if required. It is vital that the outcome of the negotiation results in additional time away from the workplace. As you're aware, the Building Momentum Agreement concludes at the end of this year. However, with spiralling inflation, there is a necessity to fast-track engagement to address pay in relation to this inflation increase. It is my understanding that talks will commence in the coming weeks. The Nursing Expert Review Body, ERB, was established by the Minister for Health in 2021. This was initiated as part of the resolution of the nurses' dispute. The remit of the ERB was to conduct a general review of nursing and midwifery, as well as specific issues related to management grades. This is the first of a review of nursing since the landmark Commission of Nursing in 1998. PNA presented both an oral and written submission to the body in 2021, and the report was published last week, and it consists of 5 themes: the current context, the nursing and midwifery workforce, education and professional development, digital health, governance and leadership structures. The report consists of 47 recommendations. Don't worry, I'm not going to read them all. And it is our intention to hold an NEC in a number of weeks' time to analyse the report in more detail. The Chief Nurse, Ms Rachel Kenna, has accepted an invitation to address the NEC. Overall, we welcome the report. However, it will present some challenges as well as opportunities. Some positive recommendations include the addition of 1 extra point on the CNM2 scale and the introduction of a long service increment for CNM2s. The extension of the location and qualification allowance to the CNM3 grade. The progression of 3% of the nursing workforce to AMP grade. And the 3.28% increase effective from February 2022 for promotional grades. The 3.28% is being addressed at the sector bargaining unit engagements as part of Building Momentum. The nursing unions are in dispute with management in relation to the quantum of money and the calculation of same. This is subject to intense negotiations. However, we expect that it will be resolved in the coming weeks. Prior to the report being published, we alerted the Department of Health in relation to the glaring omission of there being no reference in the report of the mental health policy sharing the vision. Following engagement, this has now been rectified in the body of the report, and also we have received correspondence from the Department of Health assuring us that the implementation of the ERB report's recommendations will be conducted with the firm understanding that current mental health policy, as outlined in sharing the vision, will be advanced simultaneously and supported by implementation of the ERB recommendations. We have been engaging further with the Department to press for the establishment of a national implementation/oversight group consisting of management and unions, and that there is union representation on all subcommittees that evolve from the report. It has been clarified that there will be an oversight body, and we have been given assurances that PNA will be represented on this body and on subcommittees. I would like to thank all our members, committee members and branch officials for all the hard work and commitment throughout the pandemic, and I look forward to your ongoing support. I want to thank the Officer Board for their exceptional hard work and dedication during these extremely trying times, and particularly over the last few days when we have lost both our admin staff in preparation for conference. The Officer Board have really stepped up. I want to thank Andy Myler, who's stepping down from the board this year, for his commitment and valued input, and of course his humour over the past 8 years as a trustee. And I wish you well on retirement, Andy. I want to thank all the staff for their continued dedication, tireless commitment and flexibility during these difficult times. Finally, I want to thank all the wives, husbands and partners of all P&A activists, and I would like to thank Leash for her support throughout the year. In conclusion, can I say it is great to see so many of you back here in person. By any standards, I think it is true to say that we are living through extraordinary times. From the point of view of the P&A and our members working tirelessly on the front line, I cannot recall a time when the demands on our mental health services and the challenge that those services face has ever been greater or so acute. Of course, our training, our professionalism and our commitment to what we do will help us face these challenges. But we will need the support, the full support of the government, the relevant ministers and the HSE to ensure that we have the investment in staffing and resources to deliver a mental health service that is fit for purpose and capable of responding to the surging demands being placed on it. I am determined that those responsibilities are delivered on. Thank you.